Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. And today we've finally got a Brit on the show.
Yay!
Yay! And David is only about an hour's drive from me.
An hour, yeah. About an hour north.
Yeah, an hour north. Yeah. On the road that is always mentioned for traffic jams on a Friday night on the A1, which is kind of like our highway or motorway, what we call it over here. And David's also a fellow adoptee and also a therapist. So really looking forward to this conversation, David.
Thank you. So thank you for asking. Good to be here.
Good to be here. As we were chatting before I hit record, you said you were expressing the magic of when we adoptees come together, either in person or on Zoom, as so many of us do these days. And what does that magic? What's that magic about for you, David?
I mean, I see a lot of clients who aren't adopted as well, but I think for me, adoption is a very unique thing. It's one of those things in life when if you haven't been through it, I think empathy can only take you part of the way to connecting with that person. And I think, for clients that I work with, I was saying before, most of them have sort of heard my story, and that's the reason they've contacted me. There's a lot of barriers have been broken down before we even start. And it's just a wonderful thing going to a therapist. I went to a therapist myself a few years ago, and she wasn't adopted. She was brilliant. She was great. We did a lot of amazing stuff, inner child stuff. But she often would say, I can only get it part way. So when clients do come, it's a special bond. Before we've even started, even that initial, I tend to do like an initial sort of phone call assessment type thing before we start the sessions. And I was chatting to someone last night from Scotland who I'm going to be starting with, and just on the telephone, there's that instant, almost like a sigh of relief that someone gets me, and often adoptees will say, I've been to a therapist and that therapist was great, but actually there was something missing. And actually, it's that someone had been through it. That's the thing that was missing. So yeah, you'll find as we go on, Sam, you'll ask me a question and I'll just talk. Yeah. You'll have to keep dragging me back. It's one of my habits, actually. I'll just go off and my imagination goes like a pinball machine, like just going off all over the place. But yeah, that's definitely for me. And you were saying as well before, about meeting their parents, meeting their birth mother. That weird supernatural thing that we can't stick a word on, that bond that I know when I met my birth mother, she was a stranger, I've seen her in a photograph, obviously giving birth to me. She was a stranger. Met her when I was 28. But when I walked through that door, she was sat there in front of me. There she was, there I was, because we look alike. And actually, there was a bond, there was a weird thing. And even now, even though, I mean, this was 23 years ago nearly when I met her. Even just now talking to you, I can feel it. I can feel it. It's a weird thing. It's I don't know. What would you describe it as? What words would you sort of attach to that feeling?
Well, I think it's the felt sense of oneness. It's the lack of separation. So the metaphor I came up with for this about my almost supernatural connection with my birth mother was reading a letter that she'd written 4 days after I was born. And I read 48 years later. And she died 35 years after writing it. And I had a felt sense of oneness with her, whatever that is, 13 years after she died. And the metaphor that I came up with was this swimming pool that I go to in Leeds sometimes when mine is shut, which is a huge swimming pool that has a raisable plastic wall to make one huge swimming pool into two little ones, right?
Right.
And that wall. So I'm one swimming pool. My birth mother is another swimming pool. There's a wall between us, right? The wall between us was my very short-lived anger of her, anger towards her, and fear of her rejecting me again. Right? So that was the wall between us. It was an emotional wall, I guess, composed of trauma, right? And as I read that letter, the wall just dropped to the floor of the swimming pool, and two little swimming pools became one big one. So it's like it's more like a merger than a handshake.
Yeah.
So it's two little things becoming one big thing. It's not two little things being connected.
Yeah. I love that. I love that metaphor. Yeah, I totally get that. And as you're saying that, you know, I'm just thinking back to when I did meet my birth mother. And yeah, it did feel like that. That's really powerful. That's really deep. Sorry, I go silent, which isn't good for podcasts, is it?
Yeah. It's the example for me, or the epitome. Actually, it would be the epitome. It would be my peak healing experience. My peak healing experience, amongst a load of other ones, right? But none of them have that profundity that moment has, and it's germane to what we're talking about today, because when you talked about the magic of adoptees connecting, I thought of this theme for our discussion today, which is the magic of healing.
Yeah.
Because it is, well, magic, supernatural. Yeah. Does it feel magic to you?
I think for me it felt magic in the moment. It's interesting that the healing thing is very interesting. I know when we spoke a while ago, we mentioned, and this sort of dovetails nicely into this actually, about the adoptive dog thing. You know, I understand the concept of it. I'm not hugely a fan of it, but I understand it. But I think for me, my fog, if you want to call it that, started when I met my birth mother. So I had that initial supernatural, you know, incredible moment of this bond with this woman who I'd never met for 28 years. And I think, you know, there's a caveat to that as well, isn't it? There's an interesting bit. Actually, her actions caused a lot of trauma in my life, you know, and I know there's various reasons for, you know, birth mothers giving their babies away. And I've forgiven, and I've healed in that respect. I've heard her side of things. I've heard her story, we don't need to get into the did you have a choice or not. We don't, that's not for today. But actually, that was a beautiful moment. But then my life sort of fell apart in one sense because all of a sudden I went from this quite fairly secure life um to actually not knowing who I was. That's exactly how I felt. I remember, who am I now? I'm a part of this family. I'm a part of that family. I'm not part of either family. It was like a mind blowing thing for me. And the months after that, for me, and it's different for all adoptees, obviously, but the months after that for me were very, very confusing, very stressful. Um, when actually I felt, I don't know, all adoptees, we feel like sometimes we don't belong on this planet. We feel like aliens and things like that. But that was magnified 1,000 times for me. Um, and so like attached to that beautiful moment is, well, what happened next? Because then, I went through, well, this is my family now. I need to be part of them. In context, my birth family only lived about an hours north of me towards Newcastle way. So it's not a million miles away. Um, but I couldn't be part of their day-to-day lives. I really wanted to be part of their day-to-day lives, but I couldn't be. But then there's that sense of betrayal, like I betrayed my adopted parents, and I'm stuck in the middle of all of this. Absolutely, my mind is completely blown. So I've gone from that beautiful supernatural moment that we talked about to absolute chaos. Um, and that was a really tough time for me. It was.
But it's a mind part though. You've gone from no mind.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk Buddhist stuff, right? You've gone from no mind to hyperdrive.
Yeah. It's a good way of describing it. Yeah.
And confusion, I guess, is it?
Confusion is
be the biggest. Would that be the biggest, or turbulence? I don't know. What would be the biggest? What would be the words for that capture that?
Yeah, confusion, absolutely. And then there's like this hope mixed up in all that, hoping that I can be part of that family. When actually I can't, because they've got 28 years of history and life stuff going on and routines and things like that. So then that hope comes and goes, a bit like that drama triangle, if anyone's familiar with that drama triangle. They all almost became the perpetrator in that relationship, and I was the victim. And then they would try to rescue me, and I would go back in, and then it would be hurtful again, and I'd come out, and it was this cycle. And none of it was malicious, none of it was done on purpose. I was welcomed. I was welcomed into the family, but the dynamics are such that it was never going to work how I wanted it to work, how I dreamed. You know, it was going to work. So yeah, confusion.
Yeah, but it
Absolutely.
wasn't just confusion in your head. The confusion wasn't just in your head. It was also playing out in the relationships. You weren't compartmentalized here. It wasn't just you going round and round in your head. There were different interactions going on, and there were different things happening, right? And different people were saying different stuff, and it was.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in my birth family, I had a half brother who didn't know anything about me, and then obviously found my birth father, and all of that sort of confusion started happening. All of this time because of the way I deal with stuff, and I was thinking about before we started this, thinking about it this morning of how every adoptee, when we're faced with a traumatic situation, we revert to type. So whatever our attachment style is, or whatever the tools our brain automatically uses to keep us safe, that's what kicks in. So for me, it was avoidance with my adopted family. Kept it a secret, didn't tell anyone, um, because that felt safe for me. So I've got on one side, I've got all this confusion and turbulence going on, yeah, from my birth family and in my all my stuff and everything else. And on the other side, we're complete ignorant from my adopted parents because I kept it a secret. And the distance between the two was such that, kept that up for several years. Lived this secret life, really. And in my head, I was doing that to keep myself safe, my inner child safe. But ultimately, it felt really unsafe. It was bizarre. It was a bizarre time. And I'm sure many adoptees who are listening to this can relate to that. When we get in touch with our birth parents, there's no roadmap. I think it's organic. It happens in a different way with different people and in different ways. And actually, in one sense, there's no wrong. I actually went against all advice and just turned up at a house when the social worker was telling me I should meet in a public place and have someone with me or go to a park or did it my own way.
So what was there a point at which the confusion, you got a glimpse of clarity, or you're in the fog? Everybody talks about being in the fog, but nobody says or in the fog or out of the fog, right? But they never talk about what happens next, right? So for me, like you're in the fog, so traditionally we would say, we're unaware. That traditional fog would be we're unconscious of the damage, the emotional damage that adoption has wreaked on it. So then we come out of the fog and we see it. To continue the metaphor, we see the dark clouds of trauma. Right? So that's what we see. Okay, so what happens next, right? What do we see next, or what did you see next?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, not to want to be over dramatic, but I don't think I've ever come out of that fog. I think it feels as confusing now often than it did
Right.
than it did 22 years ago. But I think what happened for me was every time I was with them. So yeah, you go through that classic. Well, I did anyway. That classic honeymoon phase of almost becoming an obsession. I need to be. This is my family. This is my blood. All that sort of stuff. And I want to spend as much time with them as possible. It was sort of before smartphones and video calls and things like that. So it would actually be like proper phone calls and text messages. Do you remember text messages when you didn't have predictive text? And it took you about 10 minutes to do like a 3-sentence text message. It was that. It was literally that. I'll go around. It wasn't that instant video call type thing that we've got now. So I could put more effort in, I guess. So when I was with them, I felt like I belonged. And I could sort of put all of the trauma stuff in the back of my head because I was almost like, I should be. This is where I was meant to be. And it was the coming away, coming back home, and then I would sort of go back down again, and it was this cycle of feeling okay when I was with them, and then coming away, and then obviously I've got the secretive thing going on the other side. It was really really disturbing. So in answer to your question, I don't think I've never sort of had a clear sky with it all. It still feels odd. It's still disturbing. I go through stages of I wish I'd never done it. And then sometimes I feel like I'm really glad I've done it. Wish I'd never met them. Actually, it feels a bit like a burden, and then other times it feels like a joy. And there's always that way, left and right, left and right, left and right, and that's never left, and I don't think it does.
Does it bother you less then?
I think it bothers me less now, because I've put some boundaries in place. My birth mother is a lovely person. She got quite possessive, quite needy, and that sort of had the effect of pushing me away. And I can understand why she did. You know, there was if I went for 2 or 3 weeks without phoning her, she'd have a big, she'd feel rejected. She'd say, "Oh, you don't love me anymore," and you know, but there was a massive pressure on me, which made me not want to talk to her. And this is a woman who was forced to give her childhood at 17 in 1972, and then was offered no therapy, was offered no help, was offered no social security or social services or anything, no counselling. Just get back on, there you go, you can go home now. She's held her own trauma um, for 28 years before she met me, and she still does. She still has that trauma. She's never been to therapy, never tried to process anything. And so I can see it when I do see it. I can see the anxiety. I'm not going to leave again. Am I going to come back? You know, so I'll get the odd message now and again. I haven't heard from you for ages. I'm just scared that I'm going to lose you again. And you know, she's got a lot of this panicky stuff going on in her. But it does get easier. But I think I've had to manufacture that. So put boundaries in place. Like I'm not going to answer messages all the time. I'm not going to. And it sounds a bit brutal. Maybe it sounds a bit unfair, but actually, I have to do that for me. Um, and I've sort of lost touch with her a little bit. I haven't seen her for a while. She sort of popped up again at Christmas. Normally, I've come to terms with that for me, but the downside of that is that doesn't sit with her. You know, we want something different, um, which is tough, and I think that's gonna always be like that.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah. We had there's another therapist on the show, a stateside therapist. I'm not sure who it was now. Anyway, what one of the central points they were talking about this reunion stuff, and the fact that we as adoptees have probably done some work, and and they may have done some work too, but the likelihood is that they haven't. They're less likely to have done it. So we're more grounded. We're calmer in our demeanor. Our emotional roller coaster doesn't rock and roll as much as theirs, and but because of that, we have some expectations of them, but they haven't moved on so much. So I wanted to just drop that in because it does seem to be quite a common theme. Bearing in mind what you just said, right?
Yeah, it's very relevant. Yeah, she hadn't done any preparation. In fact, she'd been told she was never going to see me again, and that was very common in the 70s. You were never expected. It was engineered by the local authority that you would never see a baby again. Names were changed often. You know, addresses weren't given. It's very, very different these days. But yeah, she was there. She never expected to see me ever again. She said she thought about me on my birthday, and so yeah, it was completely a surprise for her, and a shock.
Yeah,
a complete shock for her that I got in touch.
So just another point, if for people outside of England, in terms of the detail on this. So in 75, records became open, and my mum sometimes, presumably my dad at the time, unfortunately my dad died like 6 years ago, but my mum became aware that the records were, my adoptive mum, she became aware that the records were going to be opened on request from 75 onwards. So in 72, obviously that's before that's happened, and so in those days it seemed, you know, like a final thing. It wasn't changed until 3 years later. So did you acclimatize to your confusion?
Not for a long time, no. And I think I didn't help myself by keeping it a secret from my adopted mum had died by this point. So it was just my dad and my adopted dad. Um, and I remember telling him, because I got to a point where I thought I'm going to have to tell him. I told a few friends, I told my sister, but I've got an adopted sister from a different family. I told her, but if he found it out, secondhand, that would be really awful, and that would really hurt him. So I plucked up the courage to tell him, thinking that, like you just said, that actually the confusion and stuff maybe might have been eased by the fact that he could come on board and, be part of my journey and be part of this new discovery and things like that. It didn't quite work out as
Uh,
as I expected it to. He reacted very badly to me telling him that I found my birth mother. Um, that when I first told him, he reacted. He reacted okay. I'd gone around his house, and I don't have a good relationship with him. I never had growing up. You know, he was very, very harsh father. Um, and so I struggled to talk to about him about the weather. Never mind, I found my birth mother, and he reacted okay, and he just sort of said, "All right, I thought you weren't interested," and whatever, because they'd never told me anything about her. And then about 5 days later, he turned up at my house and full of anger and how dare you do this? This is your life. Never don't want anything to do with it. Never talk about it again. Have you visited your mum's grave? This really, and it really fractured our relationship. Um, so that added really to my confusion and oh, why have I done this? Um, and that lasted. That I mean, that's to be honest, that's still the same. I have led a double life. He still won't talk about it. He's still alive. Still won't talk about it. Um, Time for my birth mother's been at my house, and sometimes he had the habit of turning up. And I thought at one point we're going to meet each other accidentally. It never happened actually. So he's never met her, never talked about her, won't let me talk about her. And I can see, I tried to see the side of things. I tried to be empathic and think, yeah, and I made the point of you're still my dad. I'm not trying to replace you and all that classic stuff. But I think it was unfair. Actually, I do resent him for reacting like that. Um, because it's my right. I say that I've said this a lot to adoptees over the years when I told my story to adoption groups and things. If your child one day is going to want to find out who their birth parents are, then you have to let them. You have to because it's their right. Um, but it wasn't good. It wasn't good. So it still rumbles on, Simon. It really does. I'm 50, nearly 51, and it still rumbles on. But it's more in the background, I guess. A lot of that maybe is because I'm very busy in my work and my job and life and stuff. And my birth mother doesn't feature heavily. Um, and I think from her point of view, I think she's pulled back. There's various family situations have happened that she hasn't told me about. That actually, oh, I knew that person. They died like 6 months ago, and you didn't even tell me. That sort of thing. One of my nieces got married, and I wasn't told about it. So I think she's sort of pulled back as well. So maybe it's just finding the equilibrium, but it's taken a lot of time to get to this point. And other adoptees are different. I've got a sister, like I said, I've got a sister who's adopted, and she met her birth mother, and they've got an amazing relationship. They're like, it's absolutely embraced her, and the children call her grandma, and they go on holiday together, and they're having this amazing life almost as if her adoption never happened. Um, and that's just the way she's dealt with it. That's the way I've dealt with it. Two very different things. Totally forgot what your question was, but
well, yeah,
did that
I
answer?
guess what I'm getting at is that in my I put a post out on this actually just before I came on the the call. So I think like we use these terms light fog and healing and also and we don't clarify what we mean, right? So to me, on one level, healing is being triggered less,
Mm.
right? it's feeling trauma less. And I think most people would see that as what they're looking for. Most adoptees will say, you know, I don't want to feel insecure anymore. And is that the sort of thing that summarizes what your clients say to you, or is it something else? What is it that your clients, what's the outcome that they're looking for?
Yeah, and just on that concept of healing, when it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because we think of healing as, I don't know, if part of our body heals, it goes back to being how it was before we were injured, possibly. And the adoption with adoption stuff, it can't go back to how it was, because we've fundamentally changed in that moment when we've met our birth mother. But often healing, you know, I just dislocated my thumb really badly a year and a half ago, and I still can't move it. So it's healed. The bone isn't sticking out anymore, which it was, and it's not bleeding, but actually it's healed. It's stitched up, and it had an operation, and the surgeon did an amazing job. But actually, I can't fully move it like my other one, and I'm never going to get that full movement back in my thumb. And I think when we are in reunion, I think there's a sense of that actually life is never going to be the same. Like you say, the triggers and things like that can be processed. That early trauma stuff can be processed. To do a lot of inner child work, you know, healing that inner child, and triggers go, and we learn to live. And yeah, we can live a good life, and we can process things, and huge success. But actually, just like my thumb, it's it's never going to be quite the same once we've done it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. But we're dancing the metaphor dance, aren't we? Like, you know, so on we're coming from a mental health comes from, you know, mental health has been around for a lot shorter time than physical health. So most mental, you know, a body health, whatever we call it, physical health, that comes from a kind of like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I've broken my leg. Right, well, let's fix your leg. But nature does the fixing, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's not strong again, but we kind of like, we can get into the whole there used to be this you ever watched this there was an American series called Nip Tuck, and it was about plastic. It was about plastics, two plastics, yeah, in Florida, and each episode started off with, what don't you like about yourself? Right. So the client came into the office, and the two guys are sat there. What don't you like about yourself? Right. So the focus is what's wrong with you. The focus of GP that was what don't you like about yourself. If you go to A&E, accident in an emergency, or ER, what they call in the States, it's what's wrong with you. And we've taken that model into mental health. It's what's wrong with you, but it's called mental health. It's not called mental disease, right? And we're dancing we can dance a whole metaphorical dance around this wound, and well, on one hand, healing is on one hand, there's a part of us that's never been wounded. You know what the essential part of us, our spirit, our consciousness, our awareness, that's a part of us that's been veiled by our trauma, damaged by it, right? That's in kind of my view. But we can, like, that's what I try to get to. I try to get to strip the metaphor away. What is it that your clients are looking for? They're looking to be a bit happier, are they? I mean, what is it that they're looking
I
more
think
at?
if there was a common theme, it would be I don't know what's wrong. Something feels wrong, and that's working itself out in relationship problems. That's working its way out in marriage issues, anger issues, um, anxiety, social anxiety, um, all of these things. But they don't know. All they know is they're adopted, and they feel it's a, they feel something's wrong. So they come to therapy
To feel
with
right.
I don't really know what's wrong. And so when we explore it, obviously we get back to that primal wound. Of course we do. But actually, it's like lots of little light bulbs coming on. Oh, it's because of that. It's because of that. There's a great guy called Paul Sunderland. You probably heard of him. Who does a lecture, I think it's on YouTube, on relinquishment, and the trauma that's involved in relinquishment. And if a child's been through like several foster placements or whatever, each one is a separate trauma. And it's a fantastic lecture. He's very easy to listen to. But we don't realise. And so they come with just like this. I don't know, almost like a despair. I don't know what's happening. I'm on my fourth marriage. I'm on my family's falling apart, and I'm just getting angry, and no one else is like this, and my friends don't get it, and it's that just desperation of there's something wrong with me, and I really want to find out what it is, because actually it's so confusing, and it's so emotional that it's overwhelming for me. Please, can we investigate what this might be? And I think that would be the common theme from all the adoptees that I've seen. And I've seen a lot of adult adoptees in therapy. I'm seeing a lot at the moment. I don't know what it is, but it's something, and it's something different to my friends and my family and whoever who haven't been adopted. That's absolutely the common theme that I'm seeing anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So if you put it into two words, they want to feel right. They feel wrong, but they want to feel right.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
But they're not sure how to
Okay.
do that.
So it's a bit more matter. It's a bit bigger than I'm seeing it. So I'm expressing it like I want to, I want to feel better in myself, or I want to be triggered less. Though I'm looking at it at a more granular level, a more maybe considered level, because I run a podcast and I've done 370 leading episodes. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's it would be what I looked at it at this more granular level. It's like I want to be less triggered. I want to feel good more of the time. I want less of these. I want less of these bad feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I want to feel right, I want to. If I want to feel right, I want to feel wrong less. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
And there is that element to it, of course. Often people come to me, they're not really being triggered necessarily by anything. It's just they're just struggling. Everything's hard work. I've had my own struggles with relationships with people. Very common theme in adoptees, marriage breakdowns, friendship breakdowns, because we get so far into a relationship, don't we? And actually, it feels a bit scary because our brains are programmed not to trust people, and so we pull back. It's not necessarily a trigger, as in the sort of the obvious things that you could think of as that instant sort of fight or flight stuff. But it's like a cloud. It's a cloud. It's like, what is this cloud? Why am I under this cloud? I don't get it. I should be able to do relationships. I'm an intelligent, well-educated. I'm in touch with my feelings, but I'm on my third marriage. And actually, why? It's that sort of vibe is coming a lot to me now at the moment. It's just I know there's something wrong, but I don't know what it is.
So it's way bigger than I'm putting it. So The reason I went down that road is because that arch of the conversation was because you're saying that you've been in this confusion for 30 odd years. I'm getting the feeling that the confusion is not as you're not as confused as you used to be.
No,
and I'm also getting the feeling that you're less bothered about your confusion. So I see two things there. Two things, because I used to worry about worrying, right? And I'd worry about worrying. And then as a guy I know says, we just got more on our mind. Got more on our mind, like we can a moron, right? More.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but there's two things we're fighting. We've got the feelings that we've got, and then we've got the backlash against those feelings. I don't want to feel that way, and most people, I think, are focused on the feeling better, rather than being less bothered about their feelings. Do you know what I mean? Less bothered about our feelings. We're and disidentifying from our feelings would be a next step of after that in my little world, right? In Simon's adoption podcast, obsessed brain. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And yes, I would say that I'm not bothered. I'm not as bothered. I mean, I guess for me, it's my career. I live it. There was a time in my life when I wouldn't talk about it. It was an embarrassment. I was ashamed by it. Actually, that was a long time ago. I work in this area now. So that has dropped for me. And but I look at someone like my sister, who, like I say, she's got a really good relationship with her birth mother, and the family dynamic. But actually, she did say to me the other day, I'm still really confused about this. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what's the purpose of this. Yeah, I'm having a great time, and my kids are loving it, and she has that confusion, even though it's turned out in sort of worldly sense better than my situation did. On the face of it, and it's the classic, social media thing, isn't it? You see a picture of perfection, and underneath it, it's complete turmoil. So for her, the confusion is, absolutely, it is absolutely duality. So it has taken for me, that confusion. Maybe I've studied it and understood it more, and I work in it, and I live it and breathe it every day. But I think part of that is as well, like, sort of sickened myself a bit. I got so into the podcast and the help groups and the Facebook groups and the everything groups, and reading all the books, and I think it became overwhelming. I sort of saturated myself with it so much that I naturally pulled back. Just like if you got saturated by anything, I guess. But I pulled back because it was getting too much. It was wow. And so I stopped listening to podcasts. I stopped for many years that I didn't fully engage with it, and sort of parked it, and then came back to it. And I think that's quite a healthy thing to do, if I'm honest. Just let it rumble on, but again, there's no wrong way. We're all different. My sister has dealt with it differently to I have, even though we've had the same upbringing. And her story, adoption story, is pretty identical to mine, just a different mother. It's fascinating stuff, isn't it?
It is. I was thinking, as you're talking about the groups, I was thinking about that, the initial rush when we realise that we're not going nuts, right? The initial rush. This is, what do they say? This is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. You're not going nuts, Simon. Yes, I'm not going nuts. And
Yeah.
that normalization of the
Mm.
emotion makes us less bothered about it. Because
Yeah.
if we're like if we're well, like I talk about myself and worrying about worrying, like, you worry about worrying, Simon. Like, why are you worrying? Why are you worrying
Yeah.
about? You've been on all these bloody courses. When are you going to stop bloody worrying?
Yeah. I always say to clients, your brain is working perfectly in the context of the trauma that you've been through. Your brain is perfect. It's just reacting, to the trauma.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that's quite a calming thing to take on, to that front brain stuff, the normalizing it, the applying a bit of logic to the
yeah,
chaos is a tough thing to do. It really is. But yeah, our brains are working perfectly in the context of what we've been through. So we're not going mad. We're not going mad, even though it feels like we are sometimes. We're not going mad. We just need to process it. I know that sounds very simple. It's a
but
lot
we've
more complex.
yeah, but we've become emotophobic though, haven't we, as a society?
Mm.
Trying to,
Oh,
as a society and as adoptees, we're trying to
mm,
stuff it, numb it, deny it, climb round it,
mm,
jump over it, bury it, a million and different one things.
yeah. And just going back to, I think you said something about what's the outcome of the therapy, maybe, or the process. And do you feel different? Do the triggers stop? And it's I think it's more of a gentle change. If you think about inner child therapy, if anyone knows about inner child therapy, which is one of the main things I do, it's it's the concept that we have these parts that are damaged as children, and then they keep popping up and hijacking the adult self when we're triggered by something. Actually, when you go through that inner child and we're reparenting that little part of us that's damaged over time, over months, over years, sometimes. Um, it's a gradual it's like the sun coming out slowly, and the things getting nice and warm and calm, and then we get to a point where, like, oh, that didn't trigger me anymore, or this relationship's feeling really good. I feel like I'm in control. I feel safe. Because ultimately, isn't it, for adoptee, for anything to do with trauma, it's we're not feeling safe. Our brain is perceiving that we're under attack, we're not safe. So then it responds. So that's getting that sense of safety, reparenting that inner child, filling in the gaps that actually were missing, doing the repair, just like you would do with a human child. I I've got a 16-year-old son who is driving me mental at the moment. But it's just classic teenage behavior. He thinks he's 28, and you know, it's just bizarre. And I lose my mind at times with him, I was ranting and raving at the mock this morning for not putting his spoon in the dishwasher. I mean, it's just ridiculous thinking of it, outside of the home. But if I didn't go back and do that repair and say, I'm really, really sorry, I shouldn't have shouted at you this morning. I shouldn't have got angry. I was, tired, or it was just a spoon. I'll try harder. Please forgive me. We have a hug. No, don't get me wrong, I don't get it right all the time. I'm making myself sound like the perfect parent, which is absolutely not the 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 truth. But if I didn't go back and do that repair, then there'd be a wound. There'd be a wound there, even if it's just a tiny wound. But that would grow, that would stay, that wouldn't heal. And when you think about the wounds that we've got as adoptees, and especially children who've maybe been in abusive situations, that wound hasn't healed, and that wound is just an open, gaping wound. And that's the essence of the inner child therapy, that you go back and you reparent, you fill in the gaps, you do the repair, and then that inner child integrates into the adult. And then it's like I went through this with my dad. I did inner child work with my own father because I was getting triggered by him a lot. He's pretty sarcastic and critical, and I would regress into this little 8-year-old self that I identified in my therapy. And my wife would say, "Why do you let your dad talk to you like that?" But it was an automatic thing. I would just close down. I would stand there with my shoulder pumped till he had gone, till the threat had gone. And I healed this inner child through this therapy. I don't want to, go into inner child therapy in really detail, but also boundaries are a healing thing. I always say, what makes a good day out at the zoo? The cages, you know, the boundaries, and you don't put up a 2 foot fence around the line enclosure because the threat is great. You put a really big fence up around the line enclosure, then the threat of the brain perceives trauma, what boundaries we need to put in. It's all part of the therapy stuff. And this when the healing comes, it's gradual. And then we get to a point. I remember getting to a point with my dad. And actually, he came around one day and said, and he hasn't changed. Actually, I realized I was standing up. I realized I was looking at him in the eye. I realized that my blood pressure wasn't going up and my heart wasn't racing. And oh, I felt all right because that little 8-year-old David inside had been healed and was trusting and felt safe. And it was an unbelievable moment. I'll never forget it. And actually, you can't hurt me anymore. You can't harm me anymore because actually I'm in control and I feel safe. And that trauma was healed. That sounds really simple, but it took a lot of time to do that. And a lot of therapy sessions. But it's not like a snap your fingers and all of a sudden. It's gradual. Just like a wound. Put yourself doesn't heal overnight, does it? It takes weeks to heal. It's like that. But it's magic, it's special, it's beautiful, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So we can heal, as I always say to clients, there's hope. I've got hope written. You can't see it obviously, but I've got hope written in big letters on my wall in my therapy room, which is where I am now. Because there is hope. But clients often come with no hope. I sometimes wish people had come years before they got into sort of crisis situation. But that's just human nature, isn't it? We just keep going, we keep going, we keep going, we keep going until we just hit a brick wall, and then it's like, oh crap, I need to do something. But I've realised I'm just talked for ages there, but I hope my passion is coming up through for this because there is hope actually, and anyone who's listening to this, find a good therapist, find a therapist who's adopted, find a therapist who does inner child stuff, trauma stuff, and there's hope. There is real hope. There is.
Right.
Take a breath, everybody.
Thanks, Dave.
You're looking at me. You're looking at me like, "Has he stopped now?"
Is there anything that I've not asked you about that you'd like to share?
No, I don't think so. No.
Cool. So, as usual, listeners, there's links in the show notes to David's website and socials and stuff. Thank you very much. It's been a great outing together. Really enjoyed it. So,
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thanks again, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye.